Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Realm. I'm Gina.
I'm Rich.
So this is our Monday podcast where we're going to talk about a single topic that hopefully interests all you. So we just do some research, dive right in, and we just talk about it. Neither one of us are experts in any of the fields we're going to be discussing, but we are armchair experts, kind of like I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV sort of thing.
I'm barely that.
Similar to that.
I'm just here for the snacks.
Right. And, we do have some good snacks from time to time. We may
And the lottery tickets.
Crunch in your ear and the lottery tickets. I was busted out by my fiance, like right before this started with how many lottery tickets I've been buying. My thing is, if you don't play, you can't win.
That is a good saying. And I believe it 100%. I just don't play. Because I have, and I don't win. So it's like, you know what? Whatever.
All right. So
I have no one to blame but myself then, right? If I don't win, I don't win. Who am I going to?
Correct. And when we do win, think of the podcast studio that we're going to be able to build. We're going to be able to build something great. So anyway, again, welcome to the podcast. Every Monday we'll do a single topic, and every Wednesday we have weird weekly news. So make sure you check back with us every Wednesday for your weird news of the week. So today we are going to be bringing forth a topic that I am going to do a listener and viewer. If you're watching us on YouTube, listener and viewer discretion is advised. You can find our podcast on Spotify. Shortly, it'll be on Apple Podcasts, and you can find us on YouTube. You'll get to see our lovely smiling faces, and sometimes we share our screen with some photos and different things that we're talking about. So if you want to check us out there, you can listen to us there as well. But this is a listener and viewer discretion advised, just simply because we're going to be talking about a sensitive topic, subject matter that could be bothersome to some people. Some of it may sound a little too graphic for others. So pardon me, I just wanted to make sure I put that out there before you start listening. So without further ado, today, drum roll, we are talking. We need producer Kez to do some sound effects every once in a while.
Absolutely.
So we are going to talk about spontaneous human combustion. So let me set the stage. So for those of you,
I have a picture in my head.
So for those of you listening, I'm going to just set the stage with two short stories, real short stories. The first I got from Encyclopedia Britannica, actually on Britannica.com. So I just want to make sure everybody understands I'm reading this directly from that website. So here's the story. Late at night on Christmas Eve in 1885, in a small farming town of Seneca, Illinois, a woman named Matilda Rooney burst into flames. She was alone in her kitchen when it happened. The fire quickly incinerated her entire body except for her feet. The incident also claimed the life of her husband, Patrick, who was found suffocated from the fumes in another room of the house. The tragedy left investigators baffled because there was no reason to suspect foul play. The Rooneys had been relaxing and drinking whiskey that evening. A farmhand who had spent a few hours with them hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Furthermore, no source of ignition could be found for the blaze. Although the flames had been intense enough to reduce Matilda Rooney to ashes and a few fragments of bone, they had not spread to the rest of the room. The fire seemed to have started in her body and stayed confined to her body, and firefighters burst into a soot and smoke-filled apartment. I'm sorry. This was the Rooney. Sorry, I'm going on the next story. Okay, so that was Mary Rooney, or Matilda Rooney.
Illinois.
Okay? In Seneca, Illinois.
And what was the date on that?
That was in
18 something, you said?
1885.
Okay.
Yep.
I have questions. Okay, for me to ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that the first case that's publicized, or is that just one of the cases?
No, this is just one of the cases, and this is just these are just stories to set the stage. So here's the next story. So this is from the Tampa Bay Times. It was an article written by Gabrielle Calise, October 17th of 2019, again, out of Tampa Bay Times. And part of the story says this: before sinking into the overstuffed easy chair in the middle of her St. Petersburg apartment, a widow named Mary Hardy Reeser slipped into a nightgown and popped 2 sleeping pills. Hot summer air drifted through the open windows. It was around 9 p.m. on July 1st, 1951. Reeser's only son, Dr. Richard Reeser Jr., had just kissed her goodbye after a visit. She was alone for the night and decided to enjoy a cigarette before bed. Reeser, 67, would not be seen alive again. When the landlady, Carpenter, her name was Pansy Carpenter, tried to deliver a telegram the next morning, the door to Reeser's apartment at 1200 Cherry Street Northeast was warm and the handle was hot to the touch. Inside, the walls were charred and embers were still crackling. So let's see here. Go on to the next. And then firefighters had burst into a soot and smoke-filled apartment. Reeser was gone, and only a pile of black ashes remained. Amid the rubble, police found coil springs from the chair and part of Reeser's backbone. Her left foot sat in the pile, still wearing a black silk slipper. Her skull had reportedly shrunken to the size of a cup. So that's that article. So what is spontaneous human combustion? We're going to now refer to it as SHC. It's just going to be easier for the rest of this podcast just because it's such a long name.
Okay.
So this is taken directly from Wikipedia. Again, I'm reading straight from Wikipedia. They call it a pseudoscientific concept of the combustion of a living or recently deceased human body without an apparent external source of ignition. So they also say, it goes on to say that the alleged phenomena appears in literature, and both types have been observed to share common characteristics in terms of circumstances and the remains of the victim. So what do you know about it? Anything? Or like thoughts, like did you like, because I used to watch these shows when I was little, like Leonard Nimoy hosted one of them and I wish I could remember the name of it.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Kid, I watched something on spontaneous human combustion and
I don't know much about it, other than what you would probably, just the regular person that doesn't know anything about it would, the minute you hear it, you get a picture in your head of someone just bursted into flames out of nowhere, is where I get it from. And that sounds like it's pretty much what it is. I mean, obviously there's other things behind it. It was interesting that the one person you said had a cigarette before going to bed. You think, off the top of your head, cigarette, smoke, fire, people burn up in their bed or whatever. You hear stories of that where they start a fire down the nightstand, things like that. But that alone should not cause that, because it sounds like you burn from the inside out. So that doesn't sound like, from what I'm reading or from what I've heard, that it's a spark landing on you and you start on fire type thing. It's something from the inside out.
Right. So people that believe in and study it with the thought that they believe in it and that they've, found what they believe proof, or they can't disprove that it's actually a thing, is that, one of the things they look at is nothing is really disturbed. Like the fire doesn't spread anywhere else, like in the building or where they're at. Like it's literally just like below them, above them, or like just around them. And there's almost always like a limb left over, like hands or feet, or
it's almost like a candle burns and you get to the end and you got a little piece left of the candle or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually part of it. That's
really?
I brought that up because some of the scientists today were talking about that. So they were talking about like quite a few things that some of these cases had in common. Like, for instance, one of them being like alcoholism. So in both the stories, people had just had alcohol. And that was one of the commonalities. And then so let's see here. Yeah. So the alcoholism, in fact, in the 1800s, during this period, there were actually the most reported cases of SHC was during that time in the 1800s. And so it was like in medical papers, doctors would like, put their.
So why would there be more of it back then than now? What would change? I wonder.
I think science and looking at things and like medical approaches, even approaches of looking at a scene or looking at what is an ignition source, what is
right. Or could it be back then, like you're saying with the investigation part of it, everything maybe that looked like it was just balled in the one group of that's what it is. That's kind of what I'm getting out of that.
Besides, how phenomenal does spontaneous human combustion sound? I mean, if you're somebody writing a paper and you like have a case that you can't really say how it's, how the fire started or whatever, it just, one of the things I said, Red had said like, oh, it adds to the aura, So in fact, in the 1800s, because alcohol was involved in so many of the cases, that some of these medical papers and journals that were submitted by doctors actually had alcoholism listed as one of the accepted probable causes of spontaneous human combustion.
A cause of it?
Yes, like one of the causes, like could be one of the causes of it. So scientists today that have researched it, they have given several like natural explanations for it. You can read them in the Wikipedia article that we're going to post in the comment section of our podcast on Spotify and on YouTube, and also on our Facebook channel. So you can read those there. But the one that really had me intrigued, that had me question SHC, because prior to this, I was like, oh yeah, this is so cool. Like SHC really exists. Like this is crazy. And then, you start to read a little bit more science and you're kind of seeing both sides now. Like I can see the proponents for it. I can see the proponents against.
One more question I have. Out of all these cases and the investigation afterwards, how many actually had a witness that could see it and could verify that that's exactly what happened? Or is it all more theory?
Good question.
Of that.
I will. Okay. I am going to get to that. I promise. I won't.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm ruining it. I'm just.
No, you're not ruining anything. I think
it's interesting to me because, as I said before, I don't know much about it other than what I've looked up prior to our episode here, which
I know. Like well, no, I'm so glad you're bringing it up because I bet you so many people listening are having the exact same question.
Another question. I'm probably going to ruin more thunder, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there any movies or any
like video evidence
or anything like that on the subject that people can watch or that we can go back and watch?
Yeah. So actually, like if you Google there, you can watch, there's a lot of shows. There's a lot of TV shows like the Unexplained, phenomenon type shows that have broached the subject. So just about any type of show that you have out there. I actually watched a 30-minute episode on Gaia. I have a Gaia.com subscription, and they have a lot of really interesting, videos and articles and things on like that on there. And I watched a half-hour episode of a guy that I'm actually getting ready to talk about, because he is somebody, his name is Larry Arnold, and he wrote a book called Ablaze: The Mysterious Fires of Spontaneous Human Combustion. And he actually had done some studies as well, and is actually interviewed for his expertise on the subject. But he was talking about so many different aspects of it, like that made sense to me. But at the same time, like when I hear the opposite side of it, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense too. So now I don't know where I sit in the realm of, like, what is this? Because so scientists today, like some of the natural explanations that they were saying was like the wicking effect that you talked about, where essentially there has to be an ignition source of some type, like a cigarette, for instance. Let's say the person, because another thing they were talking about was like, if somebody had pre-existing medical conditions, if they already had passed away prior to this happening, maybe they were like smoking a cigarette or something. So let's take that scenario. Okay. So they even talked about like morbid obesity, lack of mobility, those types of things where people can't get up quickly if they were sitting in the chair smoking, or if like something sparked that they were holding onto, or a cord that was maybe in their chair caught on fire and they couldn't get up. So they're saying there has to be.
But how does that explain what was originally said, that it's contained just to the person? You think if something like that would happen, you'd have more of a fire
like in the
Right.
whole house.
Correct.
Right.
Am I wrong in assuming that, or
No, because I would think the exact same thing. Like, oh my gosh, why doesn't the fire spread? Now
Right.
that's where the wicking effect. This is the one, like, out of all the explanations that the people against
Yeah.
SHC being a real thing gave, was that, like, if there's an ignition source, it burns, like, let's say through the clothing, okay, and then it burns into the skin, and then the skin splits, so it continues to burn in. Do you have a visitor behind you? the cigarette, or let's say the ignition source, continued to burns into the skin, and then the fat starts to melt, and so then basically the fat starts to melt and burn in the skin, and it kind of melts down to the side, and then it adheres to the clothing, it adheres to the chair that they're sitting in, that kind of thing. And so that type of fabric holds on to that fat, and then it's almost like a dipped wick, you dip a wick in the wax or whatever, and then it just continues to burn, so it can continue to burn for a long time. So I said, okay, great. Then what about, why are their hands and feet left over? Like, why is there so much ash and hands and feet left over? And that's because they say by the time it gets to the feet and the hands, there's just not enough fat to continue that wicking source, right? And not everybody is wearing like shoes or whatever. But then in that other story, there was like still a slipper and a nylon still left on that foot. So it's like my brain keeps going back and forth.
Right.
I'm like, what can this really be? But they say that's why there's so many, most of these cases are like, where there's a hand or a foot, left behind after they burn. So there have been, like I said, medical scientists or scientists and medical professionals who looked into and studied many of these cases. And it appears that the scientific community is mostly saying that SHC just isn't a thing. It's not real. In fact, one study said that in many of these SHC reports, that many of them left out certain aspects, such as close sources of fuel sources, because some of them, people were like within feet of like a fireplace. Somebody had collapsed, feet away from a fireplace. So like, did an ember pop out off the wood and like, start catching them on fire? Did they pass out from another reason?
Yep. And my first question as well is being an investigator of paranormal stuff, and like we both do, and the interests we have otherwise, that's the first place your brain goes to, I think, is to look around the area and go, okay, let's make sense of what we're seeing.
Let's talk about what it could be. And if it can't be that, then we need to keep digging.
Right. Same type of thing.
So it's like the other fuel sources that they said these reports left out and maybe didn't even think about, because what's changed is the way we look at scenes, right? Back in the 1800s, maybe they didn't think about the ignition source, such as stuffing from a chair or a couch or floor coverings, like rugs or whatever.
Back then, everything was flammable.
Right.
Now they make everything flame retardant, and a lot of things are not flammable anymore for other reasons, obviously, for safety.
Right. And the materials that were used.
Even clothing, everything. I mean, it's just everything's so much safer and made different now as it was back then. So.
And the episode that I watched on Gaia, Larry Arnold, that author I was telling you about, like, so he was bringing up that stuff, and he was saying, well, that still doesn't explain why there's few or no bones left over. Now, I haven't studied every single one of these cases, right? So we're going to talk about how many they have been, but this is just based off what he said from this video interview. So anybody that has Gaia, please take a look at it. It's definitely worth a watch, or, you can take a look at some of his research as well. So what I want to do is like take our completely unqualified version of looking at this and like try to pick it apart. Let's do our
who's not qualified. Are you talking about me? I'm not qualified.
Me. I said our completely unqualified version of looking at things. Okay, which is basically, well, let's approach this like an investigation, right? So
yeah.
Now I do need to give a shout out to my daughter and my son. My son, who just received his master's in computer science with an emphasis in artificial intelligence. He was
Nice.
an engineering major from the
Nice.
University of Wisconsin-Madison. Very brilliant man there. And then my daughter, who graduated pre-med and with a bachelor's in biology from University of Wisconsin-Madison as well. They helped me prepare for this by
Nice.
really asking me a lot of questions.
Sounds like 2 future guest stars.
My son is already going to come on to talk about artificial intelligence. I couldn't get him to come on to talk about this today because he was really giving me some things to think about and calculate today. And he's like, Mom, no, you need somebody who specializes in that. When you talk about AI, then I'll be on. So we'll see him. We'll definitely see him on. So one of the things that we talked about was how much energy. Oh, hi. We have a visitor for those that aren't watching us on YouTube.
Well, Flynn is nosing out my pizza that I have here that I made.
We have a kitty named Flynn that's visiting us. So one of the things that we were talking about was how much energy would it take to get a normal body temperature from that to its flash point, right? Like what would cause it, to have to do that. So we had to look up what's the flash point of human flesh and bone, right? So we got to start there because we have to know like what is the temperature at which it would start to have these
falling in a volcano. That's the temperature. Because I mean, how else can it be? I mean, I don't. Do you know the answer?
I do. So we looked it up. Yeah. So no, my son was asking like, go ahead and guess what's the degrees in Fahrenheit that you think would be the flash point of just the flesh, not the bone, just flesh.
500 degrees.
No, it is
higher or lower?
Higher.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, do you want to give it another guess?
1,000.
More. It's actually the human skin itself is 1600. The flash point is 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 871.1 Celsius. Skin, actually, I didn't know this, is considered, quote, anti-inflammable just based on, or anti-flammable just based on its flash point. So it takes more than 2 hours at this temperature to burn the skin into ashes. I didn't know that. So that I'm just going to jump down really quickly to this other point is, so then you ask yourself, what is the temperature of cremation? And my misconception of what cremation was is they just put you in a furnace and you're burnt, right? Like they just have this fire. I don't know. What do you think happens?
That's what I thought happens too. They put you in the box and then they slide you in. They turn the furnace on, shut the door, and then you get the ashes sifted out at the bottom or whatever.
Yeah,
that's
it's really hot and it just burned you, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So apparently it is a specialized like furnace, but it burns between 14 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 760 to 982 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And it takes like over 2 hours to reduce the body to ashes. So I didn't know like that it even took that. I just thought it was like an instantaneous thing, like you kind of like an Instapot, you put it in and 20 minutes later you have a meal.
That'd be dangerous. People be walking around worrying about that,
I know. Okay, listen. So when I'm Googling some of this stuff in my research, I'm like, I'm waiting on some government official knocking at my door. Like, why are you investigating the flash point of human bone and flesh? Which
someone's at my door. Go away. Okay.
So
I have another question.
Yeah, ask.
I'm full of questions.
I love it. Ask.
You're gonna say, I'm gonna get to that because you always say, I'm gonna get to that.
I might.
What if you get struck by lightning? What does that do to the human body, and what type of? Because that would be a flashpoint, wouldn't it? If you got struck.
What's the temp? Okay, we're gonna look this up for those of you like that are listening. Be patient.
People get struck by lightning and they don't just explode or turn into ash. I wonder what that is. I don't know the answer. So
I'm looking right now. So lightning can heat air up to 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. However, when it strikes somebody, let's see here. Let's see here. How hot is lightning? Let's look this up. It's a good question. So technically I am on the National Weather Service website at weather.gov. It says technically lightning is the movement of electrical charges and it doesn't have a temperature. However, resistance to the movement of these electrical charges cause the material that the lightning is passing through to heat up. If an object is a good conductor of electricity, it won't heat up as much as a poor conductor. Air is a very poor conductor and electricity and gets extremely hot when lightning passes through it. In fact, lightning can heat the air it passes through to 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. When lightning strikes a tree, the heat vaporizes any water in its path, causing the tree to explode or a strip of bark to be blown off. So that makes sense because that is where, so we'll get similar and we'll have to look, I'll look before the end of this podcast to see exactly how hot it is, because then that's, I think we're talking about specific heat, which we'll get to in 1 second. Okay. I think that's the next point. But let me just quickly look and see like how hot is lightning when it strikes a person, right?
Right. I mean, there's got to be other things out there just besides lightning, which we're looking into now that I'm sure people that are listening are wondering. There's other things that happen to you that you would think that the temperature, you could hit that temperature and you don't turn into ash instantly.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything like readily available. So what we'll do is I'll look into that and I will put it in the comments on our Facebook page. So do you want to make note of that question so we make sure we can get that answered? Because I'm sure that other people out there have the same question. Okay, so the flash point of human flesh was 1600 degrees. That's human skin. So, and just to kind of break that down, like if you think about it, at 118 degrees Fahrenheit, 47 degrees Celsius, that's a first degree burn. 131 degrees Fahrenheit or 55 degrees Celsius is a second degree burn. And then skin is destroyed at third degree burns at 162 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 72 degrees Celsius. And so that's like where, you know, damages the follicles and things like that. It's like basically destroys skin. So there are 4th through 6th degree burns, which involves like, you know, the full flesh down to the muscle tissue, all that stuff, all the way down to the bone. So human bones themselves, I read, are actually pretty resilient and they don't like melt in the way that skin or the way we think they do. So there's bones left over. So much how we just read about how lightning hits a tree and it evaporates it of water. That's exactly what the heat does to it. The bones themselves don't just like vaporize or break down to ash at those temperatures that they're cremated at. It would take at least 2,732 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 1,500 degrees Celsius, to start working on the bone, essentially, to like make it start turning that way. Even then, it still doesn't melt the way we expect it. Like I said, it like breaks down into these components and without like, you know, we're not scientists, right? So without going into full-blown lesson like on thermodynamics or thermogenesis, maybe someday we can revisit this topic and have a specialist on here to talk about that. You know, we'd have to find the specific heat of human flesh and bone and then try to calculate something, you know, that I have a limited understanding of. I'm assuming you have a limited understanding of, like we neither one of us are.
Yep.
But specific heat essentially is just how much energy it would take to raise 1 gram of a substance by 1 degree Celsius. So the amount of heat that can be absorbed by the body before it gets affected is essentially what it is. So it's like the human body is going to absorb stuff until you start to see, you know, so we know at 118 degrees, you're going to get that first degree burn. Human body specific heat is twice that of wood. So it takes a whole lot more to burn a body, obviously, than wood. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you want to vaporize a body, like what these people are saying is happening in spontaneous human combustion, where they're reduced to ashes, there's barely any bones left, and there's just a couple limbs and nothing else is burned around them. Just think the magnitude of an atomic bomb. That's legit. Like that's the realm you're looking at. If you want to completely vaporize, if you want to create the type of situation, like I said, that they're finding, that people that are proponents of it, that's my understanding. So are there any survivors of SHC? So
no.
Yes,
Okay.
there's claims.
Do tell.
So there was an article written by Keith Burnside on April 29th, 2016. And he gave a list of 10 cases of those that have actually survived, or what they say have survived SHC.
Survived the initial burn.
Yeah, so they
afterwards,
start bursting into flames, and they're able to get the fire put out. So
Okay.
these are survivors.
Okay.
And some of so the stories that we talked about, which we didn't even talk about much stories, I just read 2 articles, definitely have to look out there at all the different cases. But so those cases were all like, older, 50 years or more. There's a couple more recent we'll get into, but these are even more recent. Like we're talking like 2012, 2015, those kinds of things. There's some that are a little older, but like I said, these are more recent. But if you check out the links, if you check out the link that we're posting, you'll be able to see all their stories. But one of them was actually a baby who, like, they were 1 week old and supposedly just ignited into flames, and that was in India, and the mom took him to the hospital, and there was some investigation done. There was nothing ever saying she had wrongdoing, and in fact had a second child that had the same exact thing happen to it. The second child did not survive, the first child did, and the first child's still alive, and that's in India. Now I don't speak to the validity of any of the reporting, obviously, with any of the links that I'm providing, but there are sources in that article that's cited and given for the stories contained in the article. So you'd be able to like check them out a little bit more. One of the persons that say they survived was even a guy who said he was out fishing with his buddy when it happened. And so it's like he started smoking, like smoke was coming up from his body, and like he had to like pat himself, like, basically like pat the fire out on his body when it happened. So those were, I would really love to do that for another podcast, like to talk about the survivors portion of it. But so how many cases are there of spontaneous human combustion? Well, the first cases were noted in the 1400s. There was more in the 16 and 1700s. It became really popular, like I said, in the 1800s. I don't know, because that was like a time of mysticism, right? Like the 1800s was a time of snake oil and gypsies, and that's when they started with seances, and all of those things were.
That's when a lot of stuff starts coming out, where people start to believe in things, or everything's haunted, everything's a witch, everything's that nowadays you can point to other reasons why those things are or what happened. But back then, like you said, everything's paranormal, or what's the word I'm thinking? Magic, or something
mystical,
like that.
Magical. There's something.
Yeah, there's higher power involved with everything.
Yeah.
So I get that.
I mean, so I think we're kind of in a similar period of time now as we were in the 1800s. Only now I think there's a lot more science based behind some of the things that we see going on, and of course, make podcasts out of those things too, believe me.
Sure.
But so like I said, 1800s. So since the 1800s, though, there have only been a handful of cases, and then Encyclopedia Britannica had said that altogether the reportings were, like, if you just added it up through time that they know of, it's just like a few hundred cases. Recent cases, though, in the last 50 years, though, in 1967, in England, a homeless man was found in a hallway of an apartment building after a passenger on a bus had seen a blue flame in the hallway. The passenger got to their stop, called the fire brigade, and they found the man laying with the laceration to the abdomen. And supposedly there were claims that there were a blue flame coming out of it. So, again, I could not find any article to coincide with that. But one of these cases that I found, had that listed there. There was another case in 2010 in West Galway, Ireland. The coroner there, Dr. Claren, or no, maybe it's Dr. Claren McLaughlin. He declared a man found burned in his home as a spontaneous human combustion case, actually. So only the floor below them and the ceiling directly above them were affected. Again, is that the wicking effect? I don't know. I don't know enough about the case. So I've given you the brief version of both of them. What do you think? What do we think?
I think that both of them or all of them are probably related to something like the cigarette or the outside source starting something on their person on fire first and causing that is what I mean, like I said, we're not experts and that's my opinion. Obviously I don't know enough about it. I'm going to look for some documentaries or some stuff on that and see if that changes my mind at all.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's a cool, like almost like urban legend-ish type of story.
I would categorize it as urban legend. I could see that definitely. I think there's too many factors that you could just think of off the top of your head. The alcohol, the fat in the body, any of that stuff that can burn. And I don't know. I think people are reaching sometimes to make more things out of something and make it into something else other than what it is.
And that's the skeptic in you that I love.
I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, am I right by any means? No. And I'm not,
who knows who is, but like I said, I was completely fascinated by the thought of it. And then I actually started doing more research. It's not like I was a believer or a non-believer. I was just like, wow, this is a really incredible concept. Having said that, you gave the side for like of reason, right? And then I will then just be a devil's advocate on the other side and say, a lot of people have reported UFOs, and now all of a sudden we have the government saying, yes, we have them. So they haven't admitted to aliens, so that's totally different thing. See, they like admitted to the UFOs, but not like that we have aliens here. So I mean, it's this baby steps. So it's like, what if? Like I always think, what if? But for me, my opinion is probably going to be with yours. Like right now, I have to, if I had to be, form an opinion, it would be, it looks like we can explain more of what it is than what it isn't. And it doesn't appear to be mystery. I mean, but there's,
I think, I mean, there's so much science behind it, but there's like you said, the biology and the science and everything that with the human body itself, any type of outside source or anything that could happen, and all of a sudden you're on fire.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting,
just like you said, listen to your example with the fireplace. An ember lands on your clothes. You don't know it's there. You fall asleep in the chair. I mean, there's a scenario right there.
Right.
Could be.
Well, so the alternative theories that, there's those alternative theories that people have given. And, one of them was like, some people mentioned like it could be poltergeist activity, that SHC is associated with poltergeist activity.
So people are causing it themselves.
Forces unknown, like, there's like some evil or demonic spirit that's causing it to happen to somebody. Also, there's another person that said that they believe there's like a new type of, and I wish I had it here in front of me, but it was like some sort of new type of subatomic particle or subatomic aspect to it that's causing it. So again, we couldn't fit it all in one episode. We've talked about this almost an hour already, and which is amazing. And it's like, we're just scratching the surface of all of the things that went behind people who believe in it and who don't believe in it. So having said that, we're just going to post all the links that we gathered, some of the topics and research from, and, dive into yourself and maybe we'll just, talk about this again, and maybe we can have special, some kind of specialist in their field come and talk about it. What do you think?
If any of you out there know any stories or have heard anything about it or have anything you want to add, please let us know. Either shoot us an email or go to the Facebook page, post something on there.
I mean, we'd love to hear from you. We're grateful and thankful for everybody that's, listening to our podcast and share with us. And if you enjoy what we're doing, please like and subscribe to us on Spotify and YouTube and Facebook, and share it with your friends. And interact with us, give us some ideas. Maybe we'll have you on an episode.
Sure. I'm
So
all for it.
with that, you have any other thoughts on this subject?
I do not. I'm still open to the concept, I guess, but I would need more, what am I thinking? Evidence behind it. Would be nice to have more eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
Besides, I mean, I guess in the survivors, were there any eyewitnesses?
Yeah, so there was the guy
besides the guy on the boat.
Yeah, so I didn't read all 10 of the articles of survivors. So I'm like, oh, we're going to dive into this for another episode. But what I did see was the woman that was on the bus in 1967 that claimed she saw a blue flame. I did look up like blue flame heat, and I think that I had read it was like the temperature of a blue flame is like 6,000 to 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just look that up.
So where the heck does that come from?
Right. And then supposedly that guy had a blue flame coming from his body. So I just can't remember. Oh, wait. So it looks like it could be. Maybe I lied. 1 second. Let me take a look here. Blue flame temperature 1,400 to 1,650 degrees Celsius, which is 2,600 to 3,000 degrees Celsius is the blue flame temperature.
Okay. Well,
so
anything hotter than 100 degrees is hot. So in my book, if I go outside and I'm sweating, it's 100 degrees. I go,
I can barely handle 80.
Yeah. I mean, you start adding more zeros at the end of it, then yeah, it's case closed, lights out.
Right.
Time to go home.
This is hot.
Party's over.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, don't forget to check on us on Wednesdays.
Thank you, everybody.
All right,
Ciao.
Ciao.